Zachary Cooper and his mother, Gail, move from New York City to Madison for a lucrative job as vice principal. When they arrive at their new home, Zach notices someone watching them from the house next door, but the unknown person immediately closes the blinds. Their moment of silence in the house is interrupted by Aunt Lorraine, who is undoubtedly happy that they have arrived, so she hands Zach an exclusive man's cap. When the man drops his drawers, neighbor Hannah takes the initiative to meet the man, but her father chases her away and warns the man not to come near his family again. When Zach returns to the house and sees a picture of his father in his mother's hands, he goes up to his room and watches a video of his father playing baseball in tears, making it clear that something terrible has happened. The next morning, his first day at school begins with his mother as the new vice principal. It's also where he meets Champ, who will become Zach's friend. When Zach came home and went out to take out the rubbish, there was Hannah, telling him that she was studying at home and wanted to show Zach an interesting place. And it turned out to be literally an abandoned park, which she turned on and impressed him. Her favorite spot turned out to be the Ferris wheel in the middle of the tall trees. There Hannah confessed that she'd never seen her mother, and her father drove her from town to town. And as they parted on a sweet note, her father reappeared to warn the boy one last time not to come near her again. In the evening, while doing his homework, he noticed shadows and screams coming from Hannah's house, but his new neighbor chased him away immediately. So when he got home, he called the police on her father Robert.
You're under arrest!
But when the police arrived, he convinced the officers that it was a film produced on expensive audio equipment, so they had to leave. And that night Gail had to go to school, so Lorraine decided to help her sit with Zach. But during a table of monotonous conversations about their boyfriends, he noticed Hannah's shadow in the window, which meant he was right that the girl was in the house after all. He lures Champ to his house on the pretext that he has some girls he knows, but it turns out that Zach has called Hannah's father dressed as a policeman and asked him to come to the station. And that is when Zach, after his tutorial on YouTube, picks the lock and sneaks into the house with Champ to find Hannah. But first they expect to find a pile of bear traps in the basement, and already in his father's office, they find a large shelf with manuscripts of books from the famous children's horror series by author Robert Lowenstein, who ended up being the mysterious neighbor. But all the books are under lock and key. By chance, Zach opens one of them, and the handwritten letters literally form a giant snowman, which crashes into the office and breaks free. And the broken shelf with the works forcing another book to be smashed. Hannah rushes out in pursuit of the monster, and Zach and Champ follow her, eventually catching up with the monster in an ice rink, where Hannah tells her that Bigfoot must be driven back into the book, but it topples over at the crucial moment, and Zach knocks the book out from under the monster's nose. Champ manages to knock it out, and they celebrate their victory, but it immediately gets up, and Hannah's father intervenes, opening the book and chasing the monster back into the pages. Next, Stein decides that since their secret is out, he and Hannah must move on. But then they learn that Sasquatch has accidentally released Slappy, an evil ventriloquist's dummy with supernatural powers, from another book, and he decides to have some fun and unleash all the monsters, starting with the porcelain gnome killers. After releasing the monsters, the puppet burns all the books, so that they cannot be driven back in. Back at the house, a mob of gnomes makes it clear to the heroes that they are not the gnomes of children's stories. They decide to reenact the scene from Gulliver's Travels, but this time to put Robert in the oven. In the end, the boys manage to hold the gnomes temporarily and then see the book with the story burned, so the gnomes can't be brought back yet. Slappy makes a complete mess of the town, throwing books around and wreaking havoc, even managing to walk into the police station with his new friends and freeze the cops out. Meanwhile, Lorraine manages to walk in on a cute poodle she's about to give water to, but when she sees its essence, she tries to run away earlier. I would have done the same. When the heroes arrive in town, Zach gets the idea to write a new book in which he can get all the heroes together and lure them there, but he needs his typewriter, which he says has a soul, and it is in a safe place, on display at the school. On the way, they are attacked by an invisible boy who slaps Champ in the face and then gets rid of him with a good push on the accelerator. Next, they are attacked by a giant praying mantis, who gives them a real chase. Eventually their car flips over and they hide in a supermarket, from where they watch their car being destroyed. Under the counters they hear a noise, and it turns out to be none other than a werewolf from the mud swamp. He heard Champ open a soda and decided to snack on human flesh. But when they got out on the street with a temporary victory over the monster, they were helped by Lorraine, who had come to hide in her warehouse, as the town had lost communication. and she could not reach anyone. Zach asks his aunt to stop at the station and call the police at the school, but she is interested in Robert, whose number she wanted to get. He was not against it, but now he has no time. The way to the school they chose was more than horrible, namely the cemetery, where a tragic moment happened between Hannah and Zach. But under the light of the full moon, something began to happen to the girl. And when it was overshadowed by clouds, the living dead rose from the ground. Robert nicknamed them ghouls, but was immediately caught between the gates and gasped for breath. Hamp ran away, but Hannah and Zach saved him. And while Lorraine runs into the station, where she is met by Slappy, who orders the aliens to freeze the intruder, the boys are already at school. Zach takes Robert aside and doesn't understand how he can lie to Hannah that she's not human, but another one of his fictions. The man admits that he was afraid of being left alone, so he was forced to make up a proper friend, not like the monsters of the past, who wanted to get back at his abusers as a child who threw stones through his windows while he sat at home with severe allergies. He takes his typewriter and asks the boys to barricade the school and give him time to write a horror story, and the setting of the Shining stage is perfect for this. The boys try to warn the students gathered for the school disco about monsters, but they don't believe them until the school is attacked by a giant praying mantis, and outside the school, the dwarves promptly open books to free their trapped friends. Zach tries to get the students to help him while Robert writes a book, and he writes fast.
Cold was the night.
Meanwhile, the dwarves burn the books with a huge onslaught of new monsters. Slappy leads them all and orders them to get rid of Robert. So ghouls with flies burst into the school, robots with deadly lasers, a werewolf that Champ saves a girl from, which she thanks him for with a kiss. And what about the creepy clowns and Slappy, who gets on stage and breaks Robert's fingers while trying to protect his new book? Then the boys arrive and Slappy disappears in a flash of light. The director tells everyone to hide in the back room, where the boys go for the Ivy attacks. But when the moonlight falls back on Hannah, Champ notices that she is the same creature. In the back room, Robert decides to get rid of the monsters, as they have all come for him, and he succeeds. The creatures peel off the walls of the school, and Slappy goes after him in a stolen Cadillac, when Robert is immediately stopped by a giant praying mantis. However, it turns out to be a dummy with the accelerator stuck and explosives in the bus, and the real Robert and his team flee, leaving the school safe. Arriving at the abandoned amusement park, they decide to hide in the House of Fear, and the exploded monsters are magically restored, and within minutes Slappy finds Robert. Their dialogue about being best friends ends with the release of a new jelly monster, to which Robert sacrifices himself so that Zach can finish his book and destroy the monsters. At the top of the Ferris wheel, he finishes the book with an ending in which all the monsters return to the book. But when the wheel is set off by a giant praying mantis, the wheel rolls away far from the park, and at the end of the way Zach mentions all the monsters, which means that Hannah will be gone too. He tries to explain to her that she's a monster, but she's been around for a while, as she's met her 16th birthday several times, so she grabs the book and opens it. After which all the monsters return to the pages as ink. The penultimate monster was a Slappy doll who promised to dream about each of them, and after a kiss between Zach and Hannah, she dissolved and Champ closed the book, leaving all the men with only memories of this heroic little girl. As things returned to normal, the school was rebuilt. Zach and Gail were already attending school together, and Robert had developed a relationship with Lorraine and became a literature teacher at her school. And in talking about Hannah, it turned out that he'd written another book, and Hannah was back, and he burned the book, so Hannah wouldn't be missing anymore. And as he walked down the corridors of the school with a smile on his face, he heard the sound of a typewriter, and the invisible boy promised revenge. I'll be releasing a recap of the second part of this film soon, and if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe to our channel. Good luck.